Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Michael Carthy here from Carthy Accountants in Stafford. We've got most people who have registered already online now, so I think we will kick off. I'm joined here by Ken Birch from Risk Assessment Solutions. This is a joint venture between us at Carthy Accountants Limited and Risk Assessment Solutions Limited. Throughout this whole process, we have, so when I say the whole process, from the outbreak of COVID-19, we've decided we actually really want to help our clients with information from everything to do with the HR aspects, the accountancy aspects, some health and safety aspects. And that's what we're endeavouring to do by offering webinars on various topics to help clients, non-clients, anybody within small business who we are very enthusiastic about helping. The one thing I should just mention, which I found out this morning, and just a disclaimer, there'll be no health and safety advice about putting your work clothes back on after lockdown, because that wasn't very fun. So for anyone who thinks they're going to get straight back in their trousers, I certainly didn't. So we won't be touching on that. Obviously, as I said, given the various announcements from the government, this is a very important topic, the health and safety side of it. And I can't really think of anybody I'd sooner be listening to talking about it than Ken. It's obviously not just essential that we have health and safety regarding the outbreak when we go back. It's actually going to be legal requirement for us to make sure we adhere to the very strict rules and guidance that is put in place. As I've said, I'm delighted to be joined by Ken Birch here from Risk Assessment Solutions. Ken was in the fire service as a fire officer for 34 years. As you can imagine, the last 10 weeks, he's not done much more than focus on the COVID-19 outbreak. And as always, I'm sure things are going to be changing constantly, but it will be fantastic to hear where we are up to this point. Before handing over to Ken, I'm just going to do a few housekeeping parts. We expect the main presentation from Ken to be approximately 30 minutes. And after this, there's going to be an opportunity for question and answers for Ken to respond to any questions you ask. Now, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little bar, and on there is a Q&A button. If you press that, you can type in any messages that you want to ask, and we'll get round to as many of them as we can after Ken's presentation. Also, when we do hit any screens that are while we're talking, but there's not that much information on, our email addresses and phone details are on there. So if you do need to get in touch after the webinar, absolutely feel free. Please do use the Q&As rather than the chat, because the chat, sometimes when people are talking, they can get lost, so it's better to put them in the Q&A. We also will be recording this, so if you do have any computer issues or you do have to leave for a business purpose, this will be on our website from about tomorrow. So if you go onto carthyaccountants.co.uk, go into the webinar section, you'll be able to find this one in there. I'll be marshalling the question and answers after the main presentation from Ken. So kind of the only thing now to do is to hand over to Ken, who is going to tell us about the health and safety that we will need for going back to work after COVID. Thank you, Ken.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this particular presentation. What we're going to do this afternoon is to go through some of the aspects relating to coronavirus, COVID-19, if you will, and what we need to do in the preparation for reopening of premises. This is predominantly targeted initially at offices, as there is already some existing opening that's taking place regarding offices, but we're also going to touch on other environments which will include retail and others that may in the very near future be given the green light to go ahead. So if I open up the screen, so if I share that, so hopefully most of you can still see me and also see the screen that's in front of you. So we're going to refresh people's memories initially regarding the preparation for reopening. So, what are the signs and symptoms of coronavirus? Again, most people will be familiar with these. Firstly, a fever or a high temperature. Some people may experience a dry cough or similar, and also is a possibility that people will be experiencing a tightening of the lungs or shortness of breath. And then associated with that, of course, is potential for breathing difficulties. And latterly, we've heard that the loss of sense of smell and the loss of sense of taste have also been added to all those signs and symptoms. If you or indeed any of your staff experience any of these symptoms, they should go online and apply for a test. You should be advising them they should not be at work, and they should certainly not return to work until at least 7 days after they or anyone else in their household is symptom free. Most importantly, do not go to your doctor. Do not present yourself at A&E, because both of those issues will present problems to the doctor's service and to the surgery, and of course also present problems at the hospital. Call 111 and follow the advice on that particular line. So how can you protect yourself? First of all, cover your mouth and nose with a tissue or a sleeve if you are about to cough or sneeze. So use a tissue preferably. If you can't have, or you do not have access to one, then coughing or sneezing into the crook of your elbow is highly preferable than coughing or sneezing into your hands. The old government mantra of catch it, bin it and kill it still applies, and the tissues should therefore be disposed of in the bin straight away. Then of course you need to wash your hands with soap and water, and do so anyway often. Use hand sanitizer gel if soap and water are not available, and again preferably use paper towels to dry your hands, single-use paper towels, and dispose of them, as opposed to using terry toweling and potentially leaving any particles that potentially would cause a problem on a terry towel. Try to avoid close contact with people who are unwell. That goes without saying. Of course, it is recognised that if you share the same household with somebody who is unwell, that is extremely difficult to do. Clean and disinfect frequently any touched surfaces. That includes work surfaces, door handles, toilets handles, as well as any other commonly used surfaces. Clean, clean, clean all the time is definitely the watchword. Do not touch your eyes, do not touch your nose, and do not touch your mouth with your hands, preferably at all, but certainly if your hands are not clean. Do not share desks in terms of the reopening. So hot desking is a definite no-no. Do not share laptops, computers, pens, and any other materials. So what I want to do now is how can we protect other people? And the way we can protect other people is potentially by wearing a mask or a face covering. So what I want to explain now is the difference between masks and face covers. So if you can see my screen, that is a scarf, which is a face covering. Most of you will have seen people wearing these type of masks, and in some quarters, railway stations, bus stations, and like, often these are given away to members of the public to wear. Certainly, as we go on to public transport, possibly they will be issued. This is a face covering, not a face mask. Face masks, again, most of you will not have available to you, and the reason for that is that these are particularly used on building sites. These are face masks. That is a PP1, that is a P2, and this one is a P3. The face mask is designed to protect you and to stop you from inhaling particles. As I said, they're particularly used on building sites. They're not really designed for the day-to-day use, and their use on building sites is usually limited to approximately 1 hour at a time. The face covering is a very thin section of paper, and you can breathe really easily through a face covering, and it dons very easily over the ears, and you can talk quite easily with wearing one. What the face cover does is, if you cough or sneeze, it will stop the droplets from your cough or your sneeze from going into the atmosphere. The face mask will hold those, the face covering will hold those droplets. If somebody else sneezes in your vicinity or coughs when they are not wearing a face covering, then there is a distinct probability that you will inhale those droplets. So it's really as a courtesy to others that we're asking people to wear face coverings, as opposed to you benefiting from their abilities to prevent particles, which they won't necessarily do. So face covering is a courtesy to everyone else, not to protect yourself. If we now go on to the apologies for licking my fingers there. If we're going to go on to health and safety, particularly with regard to returning to work and returning to offices, first thing is deep cleaning. Deep cleaning of all of the work surfaces in the building, toilets, meeting rooms, desks, computers, laptops, keyboards, and so on. It is essential that the deep cleaning of the premises takes place prior to its occupation. With regards to Legionella and the potential spread of Legionella, at the very least you need to run all taps and water outlets, water systems for a minimum of 2 minutes prior to their being used for anything else. So if your offices have not been occupied at all for several weeks, there is a potential that there is a buildup of Legionella, possibly within the pipes, and one way of ensuring that doesn't spread is to run the taps for at least 2 minutes beforehand. I mentioned about cleaning and disinfecting work surfaces, keyboards, screens, door handles, toilets. They should be done not only every day, but preferably after use. So your operatives, employees, etc., should have access to disinfectant wipes to be able to wipe surfaces, door handles, etc., after they have been used. One of the things I would encourage is initiating a clean desk policy. Clean desks are able to be cleaned relatively easily. If employees do not have a clean desk during the day, they should have a clean desk. Their desk should be cleared at the end of the day in order that it can be cleaned. And I'll come on to some hints and tips with regard to that very shortly. So install hand sanitizers or soaps and or cleaning wipes for members of your staff, and activate social distancing of 2 meters. Notice the government's wording there is if possible. It will not always be possible to keep 2 meters away from your work colleagues. If that is the case, obviously you minimize the amount of contact wherever possible, but your aim should be to achieve that distancing of 2 meters. Mentioned earlier about cleaning work surfaces using paper towels and so on. Every bit of waste should be bagged, sealed and safely disposed of on a daily basis. And the next is one of the tips that I would offer you, which is to assist persons who may be involved in the cleaning of your premises by the use of red and or green pads. So at the end of your working day, after your desk has been cleared of all paper, if you or that occupant left that pad there showing a sign that says "Clean me," then when the cleaners have attended and have cleaned that workstation, they can turn over that sheet and to refer that area has been cleaned. This is obviously more relevant or more easily achieved if we have that clean desk policy. So red and green pads are a great idea to be able to clean the area up. So, communication. What I would advocate here is that you provide clear and consistent messaging around the reopening of your offices. Some of your employees may be less keen or think that the return to work is too soon, or in some instances has happened not soon enough. But if you issue clear and consistent messages, you need to inform your workforce that their needs are uppermost in your mind with regard, and their safety is uppermost in your mind regarding the return to work. Next bit is really important because neither myself or yourself will have the monopoly on good ideas. So if you listen to your employees, listen to their ideas about how you might overcome some particular difficulty. They may be able to offer useful insights to you and potentially better ways of working. If possible, stagger arrival times, stagger breaks, and stagger departure times. Not only will that help if they're travelling on public transport, if necessary, but it will also help you, and particularly them, when maintaining distances, particularly during lunch breaks where meals are taken or proposed to be taken. Emphasize that this is a new way of working, and so share that with your staff, and hopefully they will be on board with you with regard to the opening, particularly if you've listened to their ideas and have implemented some of those, if practical, if possible. Signage. I know much of what I've been talking about this afternoon has already emphasised or re-emphasised that which you already know. Placing signage around the office environment will help to cue behaviours, and I'm thinking more with regard to hand washing, personal hygiene, health and safety, and so on. So if you place signs, it does help to cue their behaviours. And in that regard, also clearly signal any building changes or restrictions. We will have all seen in supermarkets where the floors have been marked to represent 2 meters in terms of queuing arrangements, the distancing that they are trying to get us to observe whilst we're using their premises and buildings. So we need to signal that something's changes. People are often saying this is the new normal, which is slightly different to any previously existing normal. And as most of us know, this particular disease will be with us for some time to come. So in that regard, what I'd now like to talk about is the occupancy of the building. So in a presentation such as this, which is relatively generic, if you look at the diagram that's just been produced, this offers an insight or example to a relatively large office area. Note that people, or what we're trying to avoid, is people occupying seats that are directly opposite others, so that their breath and any droplets exhaled in the course of communication, or indeed coughing or sneezing, literally is projected straight ahead, and so therefore we avoid sitting next to or facing other individuals. This is actually an extract from an office complex in London where we've assisted them in their return to work. Large office areas, and that way we've employed a one-way system around the building, so we have a staircase up and a staircase down. Obviously the lift is out of order because that would be an area where there's a communal approach. So and we've really got people doing temperature checks and so on the way in and out for those staff. So the target is to ensure that we maintain social distancing. In your office, it may be that you only have 1, 2, 4, 6 or so many desks or desk spaces. But we want to ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, that we exercise social distancing from those who are working with us. Target, of course, is 2 meters. That may well not always be practicable, but if we're in a situation where we have to have somebody sitting at a desk that is facing directly towards us, then the use of the polypropylene screens that will separate people. Again, most of you will have seen the use of these polyplex screens in supermarkets to protect the members of staff that are occupying the tills. So consider using those screens to protect or separate individuals if we can't achieve that 2 meters separation between people. So similar reductions are needed in shared spaces and indeed in meeting rooms. So if you've got meeting or conference rooms, again, the use of these facilities needs to be extremely limited. And some of you may say, well, we'll delete the meeting room in order to occupy that particular room as a further desk space, depending on the arrangements that you have in your work environment. So remember, the object is reducing the number of people to allow the safe occupation of the workplace, if that is applicable. Develop that clear desk policy that I spoke about earlier. All paperwork removed from desks daily and stored, and the use of the red-green pads that will identify workstations that A, require a deep clean, and B, to indicate when they've had one. So, if members of the public have access into your offices, their access needs also to be restricted. And so you need, if you are frequented by members of the public, you need to decide where their access will be allowable and how it will be managed. So, coffees and workstations. Most premises will have some sort of kitchen, if indeed not a kitchenette. What we advocate is the idea of the office junior making the tea is a no-no. You need to make your own tea and coffee, and in doing so, you use your own cup, you use your own spoon, and there and of course thereafter you clean the work surface before or after you've used it. Finally, doing nothing is not an option. You need to convince your staff that you are taking sufficient precautions to protect their safety at all times. And in doing so, you will build the confidence of your staff and manage that return to work. As I said, this advice has been specifically generic because we're trying to cover a multitude of workplaces. So if you need further specific advice regarding your particular workspace or your environment, then contact me on the telephone number there, 01785 330022, or you can email me kb@rands.org.uk. If we can deal with advice over the telephone, it will be free of charge, and similarly, if we can deal with advice via email, similarly free of charge as well. If, however, you want specific actions regarding your workspace, which entails us visiting that space, then of course it will be chargeable. Okay, Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ken. Nice and informative. And we have had quite a few questions come through. If you just hit your end screen share.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful. Brilliant. Thank you very much. The first one I've got here is from a guy called Johnny. Thank you for watching, Johnny. He's got a small office with a weekly agency cleaner. Should he be looking to increase this? I'm guessing from what he's saying is, should it be going from weekly to daily, for every other day?
The short answer is yes. It is essential that workspaces preferably are deep cleaned in the first instance and then cleaned on a daily basis. Now, whether that is undertaken by agency staff, by the business owner, or a nominated individual or employee is entirely up to the specific office or specific person. The importance is that we build that confidence with the staff that their workspace is being cleaned, and it is cleaned and hygienically cleaned on a daily basis. So if you employ staff or employ cleaners on a weekly basis, it's obviously going to be expensive to employ them on a daily basis, but each workspace or office area should be cleaned preferably daily.
Thank you. So I'm guessing a lot of this, Ken, is actually to alleviate any fears that our team members may have?
The answer to that is absolutely categorically yes. Many people, and we watch them daily on news bulletins and news media, we're stating it's far too soon that kids are being allowed back to school, it's far too soon that workspaces are being opened up, and it's far too soon to return to work. This need not necessarily be the case, and I'm not entering into the politics of the situation, but as far as schools are concerned and any other environments, the importance of risk assessing the issues in the first instance, and then making a decision based upon the risk assessment as to whether it is safe to return or not, as the case may be. But the employer must ensure that he or she has the staff on board with the situation, and ensuring the workspace is clean and continually cleaned is one way that that confidence can be re-established.
Lovely, thank you. We've had one on the Q&A section here, an anonymous attendee. Thank you for coming. They've said, well, I appreciate health and safety is everyone's responsibility. Who will be financially responsible for adaptations and cleaning in a multi-use serviced office building, the occupier or the landlord?
The answer is the landlord has ultimate responsibility, but where the office space is shared, and for example, where the facilities for kitchen use is shared and or toilet use is shared, the onus is really on the individual workspace occupier to ensure that those facilities are cleaned, clean when they use them, and of course cleaned after they use them, so that they are ready for the next person to use.
Perfect, thank you. Just while we're on cleaning, Stephanie has just sent us a question through. I have had others, but I'll come back to them. And she says, can we ask employees to clean their own workspace on a daily basis? Because some businesses, completely correct, wouldn't be able to afford a daily cleaning service. So can you essentially provide a disinfectant spray and cloth and ask people at the end of their day to wipe their desks down?
Absolutely. The answer, of course, is yes. And hopefully most individuals would be willing to ensure that their particular office area or their office space is clean on a daily basis at the end of the working day, so that it is ready for occupation the following day. The reason, cleaning is most of us would regard it as a chore, but in reality, in the times where we're trying to hygienically protect the people who work for us, cleaning is the most effective way in which any potential virus or bacteria can be eliminated from the workspace. Yes, I'm happy for individuals to clean their own space at the end of the day, and obviously again, we would encourage individuals, because we can't expect the boss to be walking around after everybody has used the toilet. So that the toilets should be clean and therefore hygienically usable for the next person.
Perfect, thank you. We've had the same sort of question from two people. I think it'll be answered in the same one. So Jamie and Neil have asked, any advice on company vehicles for multi-staff usage? So I'm guessing that is A, multi-staff using the same vehicle, but also multiple staff in the same vehicle.
Yeah, well, if a vehicle is being used by, I'll deal with multiple drivers first. So if a vehicle is being used by multiple drivers, so the vehicle should be cleaned, not externally cleaned. I'm talking about the internal cab space should be clean. Steering wheels, gear sticks, handbrakes, indicators, all the bits and the switches that may have been touched after it has been used, before the next occupant uses it. If it is necessary to carry passengers in a vehicle, ideally, because they're sitting alongside one another, usually, so if two occupants are occupying two front seats of a vehicle or a van, then that is reasonably safe, because both occupants will be facing forwards, and therefore in the event of coughing or sneezing will be projecting those droplets forward as opposed to projecting them sideways, and that is obviously safer than having somebody sitting immediately behind a driver and doing the same cough or sneeze. As I said, as a courtesy to others, we can use the face coverings. I mentioned the face coverings earlier when driving, particularly with multi people in the vehicle. Your tie works perfectly, Michael.
Thank you.
But in essence, what we're doing is hopefully carrying out this cleaning on behalf of our workforce, even if you are the driver of a vehicle and then wishing to clean afterwards. Okay.
Lovely, thank you, Ken. Just following on slightly as well from something I picked up, I'm guessing for multi-vehicle usage by different people, it can just be part of their end use checklist. They can wipe their own steering wheel, handbrake before Absolutely. They get out.
Part of the routine. If in doubt, when you come to a vehicle that's being used by somebody else, I would be inclined to be cleaning the steering wheel using a disinfectant wipe, cleaning the gear stick, switches, etc. This only needs to take literally 20-30 seconds to make it reasonably clean before its use.
Lovely, that's great, thank you.
Michael, did you want me to cover some of the non-essential retail things?
I'll come on to them in a minute, Ken. I've got, if lifts are out of order, how do we comply with access requirements for disabilities? How can we be compliant with the Equality Act if you can't necessarily access things?
Okay, well, lifts are not necessarily out of order, but they can only be used by one person at a time. So if a disabled individual needs to access a lift, then that's absolutely fine. What I would say with regard to that is that normally those particular premises would have needed to have undertaken some form of risk assessment with regard to the potential escape plan for individuals who need a lift to get between floors for in the event of a fire or similar. And obviously there are ways and means of getting disabled people down in the event of a fire situation. Certainly the practicalities as far as now is concerned, then there is no problem with disabled people using the lifts for access. The only reason I said that lifts needed to be were effectively out of use was in multi-occ premises where we're talking about 8 people operating or riding the same lift car. One person, and again, part of the risk assessment may be to ensure that that disabled individual has got virtually sole access to the lift facility.
So just a quick summary then, it would make a sense for people who can use the stairs to use the stairs as part of the process. And
absolutely.
The benefit for that is they might get into their clothes quicker, like me. So it's perfect. Yeah. Just touching on what you've kind of just mentioned with the risk assessment, we have had a question from Steph, which has said, do you have to do a COVID-19 workplace risk assessment?
There is no have to that is mandatory. It is just advisable to risk assess the premises with regard to individuals' safety before the reopening process occurs. There is nothing enshrined in law that says you've got to do a COVID risk assessment. It's just good practice that you actually do one, so that particularly if questioned by staff or employees, that you have got that risk assessment, which should be discussed with them. And I would certainly emphasise that we need to discuss the practicalities of the return with our members of staff as a tool to give them confidence.
Brilliant, thank you, Ken. From what we've heard, the Prime Minister is going to be doing a briefing tomorrow about the non-essential retail opening. So just wondered if you could give us a little bit of a clue on any ideas what he's likely to say.
Yes, certainly. It is highly likely that the Prime Minister will announce the opening of non-essential retail. Obviously, the supermarkets are regarded as essential retail. Non-essential retail would be regarding sale of clothing, so the likes of TK Maxx and Next and other clothes and non-essential premises can open as a consequence of tomorrow. I believe, the announcement tomorrow. I believe the opening will probably be from the 15th of June. There are some specific issues relating to non-essential retail, and people often talk about the new normal being very different to what we've previously been used to. So again, social distancing when we're inside the shop premises needs to be effective, and for small retail shops, that will severely limit the amount of people that they can have in the shops at any one time. There are factors like that we may have been used to in terms of rummaging through the rails of clothes and deciding which dress size or suit size we're particularly looking for. That may well now be restricted. I would certainly be an advocate of the sort of separation of clothing by clear polythene bags, if that's feasible or possible, because again, you can't expect individuals, once they've left a shop and they've touched maybe 25 or 30 pieces of clothing before they've left, that those 25 or 30 pieces of clothing are then subject to cleaning. So there may well be changes that need to be made in regard to that. And also, the ability to try on clothes needs to be certainly looked at, if not restricted. And that is many retail stores that are planning to open are planning to do so, but the changing facilities and the try-on facilities will actually remain closed, and so people will be encouraged to buy the item of clothing, take it home, and then try it on at home. And if it doesn't suit, doesn't fit, or whatever, then it can be brought back. If it's brought back, or if it's allowed to be tried on in the shop, there then needs to be a quarantine time before that piece of clothing could be put back onto a rack or onto a shelf. And that quarantine period will be a minimum of 72 hours. As a personal thing, what I would advocate to those involved in similar retail would also be to use the little handheld steam cleaner facility. That may assist in ensuring that the clothes that have previously been tried on are actually clean prior to restocking.
Perfect. Thank you, Ken. We've actually had a question statement here from David, who suggested there should be a carefully it should be carefully documented all the cleaning done. Do you think that's a sensible idea? So if anything did come back to you, you can show.
Absolutely, absolutely. You may need to provide evidence that the risk assessment has taken place, what that risk assessment contains, and of course, if that risk assessment has recommended hygienically cleaning areas, that cleaning has taken place, whether it be through an external agency or by individual shop owners or employees as appropriate. Certainly a list of all the items cleaned and cleaned on a daily basis would be useful as far as the employees are concerned, as part of building that confidence I mentioned earlier.
Lovely, thank you, Ken. Neil has asked about their office is poorly ventilated. They've got dead air space. Any recommendation for air movement which could help at all?
The short answer is no. If they've got poor ventilation, the only partial answer is opening doors and no windows. If they can't get the flow through of air through forced ventilation, then the only way is by natural ventilation, and that is to open doors and or windows. Okay, there is no magic bullet as far as that is concerned. You can use either desk-mounted fans or floor-mounted fans as a means of circulating air, if that indeed will help at all. But there is no substitute really for the ventilation, and having filtered ventilation obviously helps with cleaning the air.
Perfect. Thank you.
Michael.
Thank you, Ken. We did just lose you slightly at the end there, but it didn't, not to the detriment of the question. Real interesting one here from Donna, who I know is a will writer, and Donna says, where clients need to sign documents in the presence of witnesses, exactly the same for us at times, do you have any suggestions on how to safely handle this process?
Yeah, we produce things which we refer to as toolbox talks. These talks have been primarily instigated for use on building sites, but they can be used in an office environment where the occupier gives a brief to staff, and that brief is no more than 10 or 15 minutes about what the new normal is, what has changed, what has been done, what is proposed to be done, and as I said, gets the buy-in of employees, and we don't necessarily want them to say that they've signed to say that they've read it, which is a difficulty. But if, as part of what we call this toolbox tour, where managers or office owners, employers have sat people down, and explained to individuals what has been done, then it's a good idea to get signatures appended to the fact that they've understood what has been done on their behalf in order to secure their premises as safe to return to work.
Lovely. Thank you, Ken. That is the end of the questions that we've actually been asked today on the Q&As on here. I kind of just like a few more words from you, Ken, on actually how you can help us, because this advice has been absolutely fantastic. We've had quite a few people saying, good webinar, you made me think in detail about what we need to do, and that's what they'd hope from today's webinar. Again, fantastic answer to your questions, Ken. Very informative here. So the fact is, you won't have been able to answer every single unique possibility within this webinar. However, I'm pretty sure you can answer most of them. So do you want to just give us 2-3 minutes on how you can help us after this webinar?
Yeah, by all means. I mentioned earlier on the last slide, telephone number, which is behind us there, 01785 33 0022. That is there. If people need to ring me up and need specific advice, as I mentioned earlier, if we give that specific advice over the telephone, then of course is no charge. If people need to email me a question, then they can do so, kb@rams.org.uk. If you don't remember that website, the email address, it is you can be accessed the email address via the website, which is www.rams.org.uk. So a very short email, kb@rams.org.uk. If somebody, of course, wants specific advice, we'll be happy to give them specific advice and or specific assistance in managing the return to work. Of course, if we have to come out to site, then that will of course be chargeable alongside the risk assessments that will accompany that advice. But if people are happy to email me or to ring me, I'll quite happily give any general advice free of charge over the telephone or via email system.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken. Well, all that really leaves me to say is thank you very much for tuning into this webinar with Carthy Accountants Limited and Risk Assessment Solutions Limited. As I said at the very beginning, Carthy Accountants, we are really proud in being able to help not only clients but other businesses that are out there. So please do also feel free to get in touch with us. We are running a series of webinars on various business issues and possibilities that are out there. So keep an eye on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram. I'll pretend I know what that is, but we definitely are on it. And also we've obviously got our website, which has got a new section to keep you up to date. So keep an eye out. The next webinar is 2 weeks today, which is a business webinar. We will also be dropping in any with major changes to COVID that we need to bring updates to you. I'd like to say a massive thank you to everybody who's joined us and actually joined in, because I can't tell you how daunting it is to sit here thinking, we've got a question and answer session. What about if there's no questions? So it's absolutely fantastic that we've had some questions and really happy that people have enjoyed it. I'm going to leave you now. I'm going to put you back on to the detail page and we'll leave that up for a few minutes before we actually close the meeting. But from me and from Ken, it's goodbye for now. And once again, thank you very much for joining us. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.